Today we're making a red wine dish. You know, you got to understand flavors and what makes something a red wine or a white wine dish. When I work with something like this tuna, perfectly cooked, I want to use some earthy tones, maybe some rice. I've got black Thai rice, really nice and rich. I've got some mushroom. Let me try that sauce. I've got a red wine sauce, perfect acid, and I'm going to use a little bit of black pepper. All these things tie in the rich, fat, opulent tuna flavor, tie it together. The rice is a backdrop for that. Pepper goes on, maybe a little meat juice, and this is really simple, and you won't believe how fantastic this is in this preparation. On today's show, tuna in a red wine style. Let me try the sauce again. I've got some carrots and onions and celery just sweating in a little bit of butter. This is going to be the base for my barley, which is going to be a magnificent grain component for the tuna that I'm about to put together. Grains in general add so much depth and complexity to a dish, especially something like this where I'm going to take tuna and turn it into this red wine preparation. The grain will be the backdrop. Get it going here like I would make a risotto. This is a nice way to work with something like barley. Start the vegetables, little oil, touch of butter. We'll get the barley in here and we'll coat it with the little bit of fat that still remains in the pan. Coat the grains thoroughly, same process that we would use in making a risotto. And what I'm going to do is literally add liquid as I go, rather than adding all the liquid at once, turning it down and maybe putting a lid on and simmering it, which is certainly a valid way to cook barley or any grain. I like the process where I add the liquid little by little. Stir it along as I go, let it absorb, and continue the process until I've got a cooked, finished product here. It's the kind of thing that you have to stay with. You can't just add some and walk away. You really have to stay, stir, let it absorb. We can add a little bit of bay leaf here if we want to add more flavor. The result for us will be this sort of almost creamy, very toothsome, beautiful barley that'll have this ever so slight al dente texture to it. Really a nice result. I don't like to use stocks when I cook grains because grains themselves have such a delicate, wonderful flavor that I want them to shine on through. Once in a while I might use a little red wine reduction if I want to make it really stand up to a piece of meat or a rich piece of fish. But in this case, I want to show off the flavor of the vegetables and really enjoy the flavor of the grain itself. So we're just going to continue along, adding the liquid, stirring little by little, letting it absorb, and the result will be something pretty special. About 20 minutes later, 25 minutes later, this is what we have. Barley's just cooked. It's getting plump. It's full of flavor. At this time, we can season it. Salt, pepper. If we want to make it richer, we can stir in butter. I don't think we need to do that. And what I've done is taken some chanterelle mushrooms, some shallot, sauteed them in a little bit of butter. And this can be added at this time. Anytime I'm adding a special ingredient, let's say a mushroom or root vegetable, something at the end of the cooking, I like to cook those separately and not cook them along with the grain. Yeah, I could get a lot of flavor if I started these at the outset. Unfortunately, I would lose all the great texture that these mushrooms provide. So I want to cook the mushrooms separately, add them at the very end. Let me check this out and make sure we've got what we need. Knowing it's going to go with the tuna, I'm going to add a little bit of pepper, and I think we'll be ready to go. This barley can be made a little bit in advance, kept warm, or we can cool it down and then heat it up again at the last moment in a double boiler. But anyway, our barley's ready to go. In the meantime, I've been reducing red wine on top of carrot, onion, celery. I've got some apple in here, a little bit of garlic, a little pear. And what I want to do is strain this off. The remaining vegetables really are not going to be of much use. I've taken all the flavor that I need from these. And that's the objective, is to not only concentrate the flavor of the wine, but to take the flavor from the vegetables and make the flavor of the now reduced wine a lot more complex, a lot more concentrated. So I've got this beautiful red wine reduction here. This is going to be the base for our sauce. I'm actually going to make a red wine emulsion. I'm going to incorporate a little bit of butter, blend it, literally froth it into the red wine reduction. The resulting creamy, satiny foam is going to lend a tremendous mouthfeel to this sauce that's going to go with the dish. My barley's ready. My red wine reduction is ready. Next thing I need to do is get my tuna going. My pan's on here. I've got my beautiful piece of tuna cut down to the right size, a serving portion. Start by seasoning it, a little bit of salt, twist of pepper, and I've taken some cumin seed and I've roasted it off. You've always got to roast your spices before you use them to release the flavor. We can process this with a coffee spice grinder, but I think it's better when we use a mortar and pestle. I think it's nice to leave a little bit of the texture. You don't want to completely grind it up. So we're going to just put a little coating of this cumin around the edges of the tuna. Meantime, my saute pan is getting nice and hot, and I'm ready to go here. I'll add a little oil to the pan. Set the fish in here. Remember, something like this, we're certainly going to cook like a piece of beef tenderloin, where we're going to leave it pretty much rare to medium rare at the most. I think I might add a touch of butter here. I always think it's nice to help the fish along. Start it with oil and then add the butter. If I add the butter first, of course, it'll break down faster than the oil. Cooking with something like grapeseed oil, which has a breaking point of some 480 degrees, allows me to properly sear the fish. A little bit of butter added will help me with the browning process. So I'm going to be able to sear the fish at the desired temperature and brown it slightly as well, adding even a little bit of a nutty flavor because of the butter as it begins to brown in the pan. I can smell the cumin now. It's just wafting up here. Now, as my fish is cooking, I can begin to actually assemble my plate. Start by taking a plate here, and we can begin to work on our sauce. Remember, I've got the red wine. It's been reduced over the vegetables. I can work with it as it is. Another nice touch, though, if I want to make this a little bit richer, is to add some chicken stock. I've taken chicken stock, reduced it. It's got a full flavor. By adding, let's say, a half cup or so to this red wine reduction, I'm going to just give this a more concentrated flavor, a more complex flavor. I think the trick to cuisine is when you can get complex, interesting flavors without necessarily adding more and more ingredients. Not only are we creating just a delicious flavor, a complex flavor, but we're creating something that's got this very sensual texture, this emulsion, this froth. The tuna, like cooking a piece of meat, does need to rest just briefly, maybe not as long as a duck breast, but like anything, it'll seize up a little bit. And so we want to take it out of the pan and let it sit. In the meantime, we can finish our sauce. I've got this hand blender here, and this is going to allow me just to turn this into this beautiful froth. Just keep this going here. We can use more or less butter depending upon what you desire. And I think it balances nicely with the red wine. And of course, the meat stock reduction, the chicken stock reduction is giving it depth of flavor. I think we'll check the seasoning here. Really, there won't be any at this point because we haven't really added anything, but what we want to do is make sure that it really even calls for anything. A touch of pepper, a touch of salt. We can go back and finish the process. I think I'm ready to go. I've got a nice little froth here. We'll set this down. Let's just taste that one more time and make sure that's right where it's supposed to be. We'll go ahead and take some of our barley, strewn with the chanterelle mushrooms. Place a little bit down here. This becomes the bed for our fish. We can use as much or as little as we like. I guess it depends on whether we're making an appetizer or a main course. We can cut our fish now. You know, we've sliced tuna before. We've seen tuna done in so many different ways, maybe just served like a big steak. One nice way to cut it is just along the side, corner to corner, in a bias cut. And this shows off the beautiful interior of the fish, perfectly cooked. We can maybe go back and just put a little bit of salt on the cut portion of the meat, season the inside, and we're ready to go ahead and add our sauce. Taking some of our emulsion and just kind of spooning it around the edges here. Don't need too much. I might even drizzle just a little bit into the grain to enrich the grain. top the fish if I want even. We can go ahead. I've got marjoram here. Marjoram is a great herb for red wine preparations. It's got this sort of peppery characteristic to it. I'm going to just drop a few leaves around here. Certainly this is adding nice color, a little bit of green, but even more important than the color, of course, is the flavor. I think if food looks great, that's a bonus, but my rule is when you start with great product, it's going to look great. It can't not look great. If you worry about flavor, you'll end up with a great presentation as well. So this is the cumin-crusted tuna, seared raw, served with the chanterelle-strewn barley. We have this red wine emulsion. It can be made with Zinfandel, it can be made with Pinot Noir, a Bordeaux, and you don't even need meat to end a meal with red wine. We can certainly do it with a tuna preparation like this. You saw how easy it was to make a red wine tuna preparation, but you know what? Tuna has got to be just about the most versatile all-around piece of seafood to work with. When you start with a gorgeous sashimi-grade piece of tuna like this, possibilities are endless. If you get it large with the skin on, bring it home. First thing you got to do is remove this thick piece of skin along the base here. Glide your knife along it, guiding it, touching the skin. When we pull this off, you can discard this. Some fish skin is edible and delicious. Unfortunately, tuna's is not. There's a piece of flap here that we want to cut away as well. This just has some sinews in it that make it hard to eat in a raw form, but it can be cooked. There's a bloodline over here. If you're grilling tuna, some people really find this a nice taste, enjoyable sort of flavor, but for our raw food preparation, it's not exactly what we want. We take this gorgeous loin and we're ready to do all sorts of things. The texture here is unbelievable. The fat content just melts away. Possibilities are unbelievable. I think it's time for us to put together a little Asian carpaccio preparation. Once I have a loin of tuna, I can certainly work with it like this. This is exquisite. However, if I want to take it a step further, I can break it down into even smaller loins, or we can even refer to this as a little log of tuna. So I've got my tuna. It's ready to go. And what I want to do with this is prepare a basil marinade that literally becomes the sauce, the vinaigrette on the plate, starting by making basil oil and then adding a little bit of citrus juice. In this case, I've got Meyer lemons. Beautiful, not too acidic, a lot less astringent than lemon itself. Almost, if you will, like a cross between orange and lemon, a little bit more towards an orange in flavor. We're going to start by making the basil oil. I have some basil that I've stemmed. What I want to do is add a little salt to some boiling water and just plunge the basil in. Stays in here for, maybe 15 seconds. Not too long. We want to release the volatile oil present in the basil, and we're able to pull this out and shock it in ice water. We want to stop the cooking, or else we'll end up with, we'll release too much flavor. We won't end up with quite the flavorful oil we want. I should mention that this technique of making a basil oil works perfectly well with any soft, leafy, green herb, tarragon, chives. We could even use something like arugula. We're going to really take all the flavor from this basil, blanched, shocked. I'm going to wring out the excess liquid. I'm going to chop it a little bit. This will help me in the blending process. Don't have to chop it too much, but we'll get it going here. And you're going to be amazed at how really flavorful, how beautifully colored this oil is, and really the possibilities that you have, aside from us being able to use it to act as a marinade for the tuna and almost a sauce for the tuna. We're going to be able to use this for a lot of different things. We can marinate fish before they go on the grill. We can use this for vinaigrettes. So infused oils give us a lot of possibility. Here's what we need to do. We want to start with a neutrally flavored oil like canola oil or grapeseed oil. We'll pour about a cup in here or so. And we can use, in the case of basil, which has a fairly full flavor, a little bit of olive oil. I don't think we want to use straight olive oil because that will overpower the basil. So we'll use, 2-3 tablespoons. It's a compatible flavor to basil, but if we were to use straight olive oil, it would be too strong. So if we want to add a little twist of pepper to give it a little heat, that's okay too. And now we're ready to go. So get our lid on here. We're going to blend this up. want to let this go for about 3 minutes, maybe 4 minutes. After about 3 minutes, we were able to remove this, and what we have is almost like a paste, a puree, an emulsion of the herb and the oil itself. And this is the first stage. We want to let this sit for about 48 hours in the refrigerator, let that flavor really blossom, really come off, and also, just as importantly, we need to let the sediment fall away from the oil itself. So at this point, after about 48 hours, we can pour this through a strainer lined with a little cheesecloth. You could actually even use a coffee filter. And we're going to just let that drain off. There's no real reason to save the sediment here. There's not much we can do with it. It's really, we've taken all the flavor from it. So at this point, we want to let this oil sit for another, let's say, 24 hours and thoroughly let the final remaining sediment fall to the bottom. The result will then be a clear oil, just spectacular. We can decant this off. The way we decant a wine, we could decant it off. We want to pour this in. You'll be amazed at the smell. I'm smelling this basil aroma just coming up as I even spoon it off here. And now we're ready to go. Once we've done this, this will last for about 2 weeks in the refrigerator. It's important to keep it refrigerated. If we were to leave it at room temperature, problem is we'd end up dissipating the flavor and the color at a much quicker rate. So by refrigerating it, we're able to keep it a little bit longer. As a little accompaniment for something like this, the tuna will be luscious and rich in this sort of melt-away meat. So it's fairly soft, but we need something that will cut into it a little bit texture-wise and flavor-wise. Daikon works great for something like this. This radish from Japan, we can end up peeling away the skin here. Skin, we can eat the skin on Daikon, but we're going so far with this preparation, cutting this tuna into a little fine loin, making this basil oil. We may as well really make the salad component very elegant too, to keep up with all of this. We don't need much with the Daikon. It's got so much character on its own, and it keeps such a nice crunchiness that really we just need a little bit of citrus and some seasoning. So I'm going to take one of these marvelous Japanese mandolins, and we're just able to cut a few thin discs here, and all we have to do is cut this into a little julienne, or even a little fine ribbon if we want to cut it a little wider than a julienne. These Japanese mandolins, by the way, they're actually pretty inexpensive, and you can use your knife, but if you want to get that razor thin slice, you ought to pick up one of these mandolins. So I'm going to cut this into almost like a little thin ribbon, and all we need to do is season this with some Meyer lemon, or really, any citrus will work very, very nice here. We can use orange, lemon, straight lemon is fine. A couple seeds may come out, but we'll get rid of those. If you get a seed in there and someone eats it, you can tell them, hey, it's a sign of good luck when you find a lemon seed in your Daikon salad. I always do stuff like that at home. Anyway, we have a little bit of parsley. I don't want to cut this too fine. I think it's kind of nice to leave it a little bit larger rather than a really, really finely chopped product. So we're going to sprinkle that in. Mix everything around. This can sit for a couple of hours, and Daikon won't break down. It'll keep its character and texture. A twist of pepper, we don't need much, and a pinch of salt. We don't need much of that either. Remember the golden rule with everything, you got to taste. How does it taste? I think maybe just a couple more drops of the citrus and we'll be in business here. Taste again and again. That's really what food is. There's no great magic recipe. There's no great hidden technique. It's how does it taste? What am I looking for? Do I want acid? Do I want texture? Do I want herbs to be accentuated? What do I like? What do I like to eat? So taste it. I've got really the flavors I want. I've got enough citrus balancing off this radish. I've got a little bit of herb. I've got the seasoning. This becomes this great little accent, this focal point that runs against this rich, beautiful, just opulent tuna. So now we're ready to slice our tuna. And a nice sharp slicer, of course, is in order. Let's get our plate ready, because we're literally going to go right to the plate with this. Now, a couple possibilities. I can either slice my tuna very, very thinly, or I can slice it a little thicker and maybe lay it between a couple of sheets of plastic wrap and pound it out, almost into a carpaccio style. But this is so nice. These sashimi slices, just lay them on here. We could cut the tuna just a little bit in advance, marinate it off the plate if we want, and then at the last moment transfer it to the plate and put a little bit more oil on the tuna itself. Now I'm ready to go ahead and spoon some of the basil oil on if I haven't previously marinated it. And literally we're simultaneously flavoring the tuna, marinating the tuna, and providing what is the base for the vinaigrette sauce for this dish. I'm just going to massage that in. I'm going to use the C word now, and I don't want you to be frightened when I use this word, but that's caress. I want to be able to just caress the tuna with the oil. I'm massaging it in. It's just, I'm really just relating to the texture of this right now as I do this. This is really, really quite nice, and I can smell the basil as I do that. Let's get a little seasoning on now. Touch of salt. Don't need much. Twist of pepper. Ready to add the Daikon salad, a little mound in the center of the plate. And we can go ahead and add a little bit of citrus to this. Again, we'll go back to the Meyer lemon, or if we don't have this, we've got, lime works great. Pomelo would work great. Or if you don't like things quite as acidic, we certainly can use orange. It's important not to put the citrus on too soon. It'll cook the fish, turn it into ceviche. We want to celebrate the texture of this beautiful flesh. I could even go back, if I wish, and add a few little fillets of the Meyer lemon. Orange also works quite nicely, although then it won't be quite as acidic, but I think I would serve something like a Sauvignon Blanc with this. Something that's got a little bit of acid on its own. Nice fruit, but that can stand up to the tuna. There is acid here, but it's not going to be that powerful because I've got the basil oil and I've got the tuna. Something like this is great as a little first course. Really nice, very elegant. We could even, if we want to, if we don't want to use the citrus, we could even add a little bit of caviar cream sauce if we want to really make it opulent. This would actually work quite nicely with salmon, or if you can get exquisitely fresh red snapper or onaga from Hawaii, scallops right out of the shell. The whole process of slicing at the last moment and marinating with the basil oil. It's haunting how fantastically complex a dish like this is when it only has a couple of ingredients. The tuna flavored with the basil, served with a little Daikon salad for texture. We have a lot going on, but it's really very simple. Food like this, it makes itself look beautiful. Thanks for joining us on the Kitchen Sessions today. We'll see you next time.